Hello, everyone. It is me, Todd Bookspan, the founder of Win by Noon, and I'm happy that you are here to hear me talk about the top 3 lessons I learned from NASCAR. Now, I know some of you weren't thinking that I'm a NASCAR watcher, but I grew up as a kid in Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia, and I grew up in a family that watched a lot of car racing. Ironically, up until I don't know, probably 6, 8 years ago. Now, family doesn't watch too much car racing anymore. But I got lots of snippets from my family's weekend adventure to go there. So I boiled down to, I think, 3 main lessons that I learned, but I would say this: I'm gonna start off with a bonus lesson. So you normally save the bonus lesson to the end. And I think the bonus lesson is to be spontaneous, to actually do something that you wouldn't normally do. So my dad just turned 81 this week. I've got 2 brothers. I'm a middle child. I've got an older and a younger brother. And we probably, I would say, for the last 15 or 20 years, we've kind of talked about someday we would go see a NASCAR short track race, which there's a couple of short tracks on the East Coast. And we've never made the effort to do it because it's a big old long haul to get to the East Coast. And we never made the effort to do it. And so about a month ago, I was sitting there watching the Eagles, my beloved Philadelphia Eagles. I'm living in Arizona now. I cheer for every Arizona team, even the Cardinals, but they're my second favorite team by this much. I have season tickets for the Cardinals, but I'm an Eagles fan. And my dad and I were watching the Eagles lose. It's something that we've gotten really accustomed to doing the last couple of years, since about 3 years ago when I was at the Super Bowl and they won. Sorry for any of you Patriots fans, but that was a great game. And I saw this commercial for the Bush, what they call it. Now I should remember since I was just there, but whatever it is, they basically paved the Los Angeles Coliseum, right? That's where USC plays football. It's where a couple of NFL teams played for the last couple of years. So they've built their fancy stadiums where the Rose Bowl is played. And they went in there and they literally paved in a 1/4 mile track into the middle of there. And they did this Bush Clash at the LA Coliseum is what they called it. And so I joked with my dad about it and it went nowhere. He's like, yeah, whatever, kind of thought I was a crazy kid. And sure enough, last Monday night, I got home and I saw something on it somewhere, got thrown an ad for it, had it open. I texted my brothers and said, hey, what do you guys think about going to the race this next Saturday? And they kind of laughed and said, well, only if dad can go. And I think they both said that knowing that my mom would say no, right? My dad's moving a little slower than he used to move. Definitely just the walk from the car to the air, through the airport line is unfortunately a little more of a journey than he's used to as someone who used to ride bikes and hike and do all these crazy things. And so my mom said yes, and so we were spontaneous and took this trip really last minute. It really came together on Friday. And so what I would tell you is be spontaneous, right? There's going to be opportunities in life where you're going to have regret from not doing things that you can do, and so the bonus is to be spontaneous. So that's where I would start. And so I would say there. So let me just show you real quick. Let me see if I can share the picture of it. So this is let's see if I can make it. All right, here we go. Turn it on. This is this track. All right, so that was the exciting track. So it was literally a 1/4 mile. So these other tracks back east are actually 1/2 mile tracks, and this thing was a 1/4 mile. It was really crazy. And the fun part, there's lots of fun parts from it, but when you got there, we actually watched 6 races. They had 9 cars all race to qualify, and then the top 4 cars went in, and then they had 3 of those races, and then they had then it was a really short race. It was like 20 laps, 25 laps, and then they had a little bit longer race that the people who didn't get in the first round, they raced again for longer, and then the top 3 people got in, and then eventually they had 23 cars on there for the last piece. So it was pretty loud because it was small. I mean, there was almost 100,000 people there. Definitely 70% of the people, they said, were not normal NASCAR fans. So their whole goal is to come up with a way to get more people inclusive in NASCAR. So they had Pitbull sing before the race started. And then they had a halftime of the race, which always cracks me up that they stopped the race halfway through. And then they had Ice Ice Cube. I almost call him Ice T. They had Ice Cube perform. And so it was actually a lot of fun. We had these teenagers behind us that knew every Pitbull word. He sung like 5 songs. It was a lot of fun to listen to him. And so that was the bonus lesson, to be spontaneous. But it's always of, how does this tie into Win by Noon? How does it tie into planning? And so I could have said, have a plan, which is really the first one, right? Is to make a plan. But I'm not making the Todd plan of how we plan to get there, because we kind of did it sort of last minute. I mean, I kid you not, we made the hotel reservation, we got the flights, and then we got there. And then we booked the hotel. We already had 2 lined up, but we booked the hotel from the airport. We did have the rental car lined up, and then we didn't get the tickets for the race until the morning of. And that's a whole nother story. That's just because my brother's cheap, and he was in charge of the tickets, and he was waiting to see if people put them on sale on, StubHub for cheaper than we could buy new ones through Ticketmaster, because there were still tickets left. But it's really have a plan. And so the one thing that I know from watching NASCAR all these years is that race car drivers go into the race with a plan, right? I mean, they've got, they scout the track, right? So in this case, none of these drivers could have ever driven this track, right? NASCAR doesn't race on quarter-mile tracks. So they actually all practice on a simulator. So they create a simulator, and they all have these fancy simulator cars that they drive in, and they interviewed a couple people on what they prepared for, and they literally had to prepare for it on the track. They didn't actually get their first chance to drive it until the Friday before. And normally you've got pits, and all the cars can drive on the track at once, but it's such a small track that not everyone A, qualified for the race, and B, there was no pits in there. So you literally had to drive back out of the tunnel and go somewhere. There's some parking lot, which we didn't see. But all these drivers said that, hey, we had a plan, right? We practiced on the simulator. And then here was our game plan when we got there in order to test out the car, get the car set up. There was a lot of teams there. And so the teammates, one of the guys said, well, I didn't have as much practice time as my other teammate. And so we got our setup from our other teammates. So again, within planning, kind of a sub lesson is who do you know that you can learn from, right? You probably have someone in your office or some other friend in the mortgage business that you can ask them for advice. Certainly I'm your friend in the mortgage business. A lot of you do ask me for advice. So I love that part of it. But it was really fun to hear about how they had set up these plans and, really come to something that they'd never done before. And so I think as a planner, as a loan officer, a real estate agent, whichever seat you sit in, is you've got this opportunity to maybe plan just a little bit better. I mean, think about your week coming up. These guys plan for months ahead, right? And it's hard in our businesses to plan for months ahead, especially in a shifting market. But, the bottom line is that, I think you have to have a crystal clear plan, and all of these teams, really came in there and had a great plan. Now, the other thing is that I think it's okay. Lesson number 2, right? So we're gonna have a plan. Lesson number 2 is it's okay to take a pit stop. And my thinking on it's okay to have a pit stop plan was because I already knew what my end plan was going to be, but I was like, all right, well, what's kind of in the middle? And in the middle of a race, it's a pit stop. And the pit stop is to make adjustments. And in this race, there were no pits, but what happened was because you had this initial race in, right? So the day before, a Saturday, which we didn't go to, they did lapped time. So they did this qualifier where whoever had the fastest lap, then you got to start in the front of these qualifier races. And ironically, we literally walked in as they started, because as you can imagine, it took us 45 minutes to go 0.3 miles to get in the parking garage that we were parking in, crossing underneath the LA freeway to get in. And I don't know, I go to Cardinals games and Suns games all the time. And if they get people moving, like the traffic is slow, but we literally were stopped and we weren't going anywhere. But we got there right as the first race started. But all the teams had qualified the day before. So they had tested the track. And then they made adjustments, right? They went into the pits and they made adjustments. And then you got to race this short race. And then the people who raced into it, they got to actually park their cars there. They got to put on new tires. They got to, maybe do fuel. I'm sure that they probably did fuel. They were probably trying to keep their cars as light as possible. And then they could make adjustments, right? Even though they won, they could still make adjustments and tighten springs and, put in wedges and all these things that they do in NASCAR that tighten or loosen their car. And then more importantly, the people who didn't win, the people who didn't make the race, they actually got to make those same adjustments, right? So they got to make a pit stop and make adjustments. And I think that that's oftentimes where we all get our butt kicked, right? We're out there and we're thinking we're going to be making lead calls, and then we get home inspection back, and we have 2 choices, right? Choice number 1 is I open the home inspection, look at it and let it derail my day. Or choice number 2 is I keep making my lead calls until I finish up my commitment. Most of us stop, we look at the home inspection, and then we call the buyer and we make a plan of attack there. And then we never get back to to our plan of attack. And so I think you have to think, okay, I may need to make a pit stop. First off, I'd say, don't do that. Let the home inspection go 30 minutes more and do your thing that you know is your most important priority, which is your lead calls. But I think the next thing to do is to make sure that as you are going on that day, take a pit stop and say, okay, great, I'm going to refuel, right? So refuel, refocus, and say, it's okay, right? The last 2 hours weren't great. The last 30 minutes wasn't great. The last 15 minutes wasn't great. I'm going to get back on track. I'm going to make this pit stop and make these adjustments. And then I'm going to get going again, right? So I think that's a really critical piece, is that oftentimes if our day's not staying on track, we're like, forget this. You might use a different word. I would say, forget this, and then just go off on a tangent and say, okay, tomorrow will be a better day. And I'm not a big fan of that. There's sometimes where we all have to do that, but I think that we do that more than we should, right? There's a thing that I told the group coaching folks in my first week of group coaching. And I said, how you show up here is how I'm going to assume you show up everywhere, right? How you do one thing is how you do everything. And I was really saying that the first time I did the group coaching, I had somebody who literally every single time we were getting ready to start, I would get an email from him with some excuse of something. He was going to be late because he had this thing come up. Oh, I didn't get my homework because this. And every single week he made an excuse. And then he would send me a chat when I got there. Make sure hey, Todd, did you get my email I sent you? And I would just say the same thing every single time he sent that to the group. I said, how you show up here is how you show up everywhere. And I was basically trying to say, okay, that's who do you want to be? Because I've been that person before who wasn't following through on my commitments, who didn't do the things that I was going to say that I was going to do when I said I was going to do them. And I've really done my best, again, far from perfect, to make sure that if I say I'm going to do something, I get it done. And if I'm going to commit to something, I want it to be something that I actually am going to complete. And so when you hit that point of saying, hey, forget this, I would say instead call it a pit stop and say, okay, let me change my tires, let me refuel, and then let me get back at it today and let me finish the day strong. And so let me lead that into the kind of the final one, which is, in the end, you could get towards the end of the day and you didn't win by noon. And then I think this is where you got to get scrappy, and you have to, again, make that decision not to give up. And so what was crazy to me, so the funny part about this short race course was all the bumping. I mean, there was a lot of bumping. They're driving these new cars called the next gen cars. And I was like, holy smokes, the bumpers on those things are pretty good. Because the bottom line is that the way that you made a pass on that short track was you came up behind the car in front of you, you gave it a bump on the inside of its bumper, it moved that car out, and then you would stick your nose in and you would get around that car. And so there was some serious bumping. And ironically, the best races were the last two races for all the people who were in the back, let's call them the losers of the day, were all really scrappy and trying to get in there. And so they hadn't won by noon. They were just not in there. And it was really fun. There was two guys in particular who were just giving it their all. Like one guy got spun out, Austin Cindric, he was driving the number 2 car. He got spun out, and then he just came right back, and he was just trying to fly in there to get into the final. And he just really was busting himself to get going. And again, I feel like it's that whole idea that you just can't give up, right? My good friend, Coach Bill Hart, would say, if you're going to be in, be all in. And you could see these guys who were all in. Ty, what the heck is Ty's last name? I'm drawing a blank. Number 42 was another guy. And same thing, like the guy was just killing himself. And in that race was those two last qualifier races were longer races, and they were still all really short. Because they literally flew by. There we go. Ty Dillon. Thank you, Bert. And he was really, really pushing to get in there. And he must've done something wrong because he qualified, but then he didn't actually make the final. So I don't know if like they kicked him out or whatever it was. They didn't really tell us on there, and I didn't read the news afterwards to see it. But these guys really fought hard. And I think that's where you have to say, okay, I took a pit stop and I'm still not there, and say, okay, I'm going all in, and really fight hard to finish your day on your terms. And I would tell you that, for me, when I was originating, this would be the gut check for me was if, my number when I was calling was anywhere between 20 and 30 calls a day. And so I think what happens is every once in a while you get to the end of the day and you didn't win by noon. In fact, you didn't win by 3 or 4. and you've made your 10 calls, or you've done your 15 minutes of lead call when you said you're gonna do 30, or you did 30 minutes when you said you're gonna do an hour. And then you've got to just make a decision. And am I going to fight like these guys fought in the race to try to make that final race? Because here's what I found during the race, right? I mean, like, even in the final race, I'm not a big Kyle Busch fan. So if there's any Kyle Busch fans, he had a lot of fans there. He drives the 18 M&M's car, and he crushed it. He won the first qualifier by far. No one was even close to him. And it was actually kind of boring in this race. He literally was winning the race the whole time, winning. And, behind him most of the time was another guy, Joey Logano. I don't like him either. And he was there, and he was riding alongside, and they would have a caution lap. And then they would get side by side, and then Kyle Busch would go off, and it was getting kind of ho-hum. And then there was finally a point where they got into traffic. They were lapping traffic, which is going to get interesting. And then this car starts to sputter, and then literally the car pulls off. But right before the car pulled off, they threw the yellow flag, because I think they wanted to bunch him back up to make it exciting. But I thought it'd be more exciting if they were fighting to get around each other and through the lap traffic. And right when that happened, they had Kyle Busch had gotten bumped by Joey Logano, and Joey had passed him up. We thought he was actually going to be in the lead, but no, he was still there. But in the end, Joey Logano eventually, finally, he tried everything. He tried going on the outside. He tried starting number 2 behind him on the inside. He tried every way to get around him, and finally hit this point where he's able to give him that little nudge and get around him. And then at that point, not only did he get around him, the car behind him got around him, and Kyle Busch eventually got back in behind him, but never close enough to challenge for the race. And so I think a lot of us would have just said, hey, I'm in second place. I'm not going to win today. You get to 4 o'clock, you've got to make 5 or 10 more outbound calls. You want to try to talk to 5 or 10 more people. And you say, yeah, I'm just not going to do it. And these guys were really scrappy. Even though they weren't there, they were still fighting. And there was even people in the back who were still fighting. Okay, I'm in 11th. I want to come in top 10. And, they might not have been bumping as hard. They might not have been doing the other things that the other guys were doing, but they still raced hard to get to the end of the day. And I feel like oftentimes we get to the end of the day and we choose not to race all the way to the finish line. And I think that would be probably the biggest lesson of all, because I have so many people who tell me, yeah, Todd, I'm just not winning. I just didn't get there. I got too distracted, which is great, right? I've had my group coaching people had to do their time tracking, was 2 weeks ago, was their homework, and it was miserable. They all said, this is totally eye-opening. And I had one person who literally put in their 20-minute block, I was totally distracted, and that was honest. I appreciated that. And that happens. And then the cool part is that after that, he dug back in and got work done. And my question is what do you do when either you feel like, hey, I'm towards the back, I'm not going to win? Do you dig in and win? Or do you say, hey, actually, you know what? I can go all in for the next hour. I can go all in for the next half hour. And it was always crazy to me. I found that oftentimes I could, I might have all, call it 6 hours of semi-productivity, right? I might have started off crushing it and then got kind of drifted in the middle, and I could really focus at the end of the day when I had to. But I really had to push myself. It was really easy for me to say, yep, I'm in 5th place. I'll just take 5th for the day. But it was much better when I put my foot on the gas and for me hit my number that I committed to win. And so I would just think about that from your perspective. So I would say that lesson number 1, have a plan and execute it, right? That's what I saw the NASCAR racers do. And that's probably why they get paid millions of dollars to execute. And I would say this, right? I mentioned that Kyle Busch got second. They interviewed afterward. He was pissed. He was really mad. Like, he really wanted to win. And this is an exhibition race, right? The guy who got 3rd or 4th place, like, well, yeah, this is just an exhibition. I was just super glad to do this. And, that guy bumped me and I got mad and I bumped him back. But, in the end, he just said, this is just an exhibition race. You know what? The reason that Kyle Busch is a champion, I don't like him, but he's still a champion, and I respect that, is because he was pissed that he lost he got 2nd place in an exhibition race, right? He was pissed that he wasn't the winner. And so I want you guys to have a plan, and I want you to be mad when the plan doesn't work. And then if you're off track, then take that pit stop and then use that time to refocus yourself. Again, I loved it in the time tracking to see how many people said I had lunch with my spouse, right? I don't know if Tara's here, but I'll call her out on it. She's like, she spent time with her dog. Like, hey, I got puppies. Like, I love that. Take time to rejuvenate yourself. I would say this, I'm a workaholic, and all day, even though I work with my wife, I work all day. Like, we rarely unplug and actually have a pit stop, but ultimately the pit stop is for you to readjust mentally, reassess where you're at to make sure that you can crush the day. And then the last piece of it is that when you don't win by noon, when someone hits you in the rear and you get spun out, is don't give up. Don't just hang it up there. Go all in for the rest of the day and hit your number if you're committed to it. Now, you also have heard me say before, if you don't hit your number, that's okay. Today, as long as you commit to get it tomorrow, right? So for me, if I was committed to 25 calls a day and I got to 6 o'clock and I've got a commitment to my family that comes before my commitment to work. So let's pretend I worked till 6 that day and I only got 20 of my 25 calls done. For me, that was a standard. So I set a standard for the calling I was going to do and the people I was going to talk to. And so if my standard was 25 calls and I only called 20 today, then tomorrow, assuming it wasn't Friday, then tomorrow, instead of my goal and my standard for the day to be 25, it was going to be 30. I added to the next day. It's no different than if I committed I was going to close 120 loans. Let's do the math on that, 120 loans in a year. And I said, I'm going to do 10 a month. If I only did 8 in January, then my goal wasn't 10 again in February, then my goal was 12, right? I'm catching myself up and I'm going to keep pushing myself to keep moving my number up. And I oftentimes find that people just do a layup. They're like, okay, I'm going to come in 10th. That's cool. I can say I had a top 10 finish. Well, I don't want you to have a top 10 finish. I want you to push yourself and come in where you need to come in order to be proud of what you did. And I think that that's really, I would say that there's a mindset of a champion. And so I had a friend, his name was Terry Wyman. And a lot of I grew up racing bikes, and I kind of became the coach or the captain of the University of Arizona cycling team in Tucson, Bear Down and New Wildcats out there. And I love Terry. Terry worked for me for years when I had my bicycle stores, and he's just a very good human being. In fact, I should probably find where Terry is. I hear he's a helicopter pilot now doing like medevac stuff. I wouldn't be shocked. I'd let him fly me in a helicopter. But we would go out to this, we call this thing the loop. We would go out to this place and then we would ride our bikes out there at night. So we'd go out there, it was lit up. So you could go out there at night, and I was a safe guy. I would drive out there, but these crazy people would put their lights on and they would ride their bikes out there. But we would race around this loop. It was in an industrial park. And you would do on Tuesdays, we would do sprints and intervals. Again, we had a plan to train to be the best that we could be. So just like I talk about an ideal week in the mortgage business, there was actually an ideal week in bicycle racing and training. That'll be a good lesson that I'll teach in the future. Thursday nights, we would go out there and we would have a practice race. And what I would tell you is that when we would sprint and do intervals on Tuesday and in the practice races, Terry Wyman could win. Terry Wyman knew what it took to win. And when he was out there amongst his peers, he had the mindset to win. And he won. He was a winner out there a lot. And when Terry would get in a race, Terry would finish in the back. Almost every time. He would be right in the right position with 2 or 3 laps to go in the front of where he needed to be. And then the sprint would come around and Terry would not be up there to win. And one day I just said, hey, Terry, what do you think's holding you back? And he kind of gave me excuses, right? How you show up here is how you show up everywhere. Didn't know that saying back then, but really what it was is I said, well, these people are these people faster than the people that you're racing against on Tuesdays and Thursdays out at the loop? He said no, and they weren't, because there's different categories for racing. There's category, the professional cyclists. You got category 1, which is an amateur who's basically like as fast as a professional. You had category 2, which is what I raced in, and the 2s and the 1s and the pros all raced together. You had category 3, you had category 4, and then when I stopped riding, there was even a category 5 for brand new people. And, Terry was a 4 and a 3 in that area at this time. And he wasn't racing against people who were better, because he raced against a lot of us who were category 2s week in and week out and could beat us. He just got psyched out in that group, got psyched out by the size of the group. He got psyched out because he didn't know the people. And I just said, Terry, I think you can win. And we walked through reverse psychology of, he knew exactly where at the loop, where he had to start a sprint to win. And he never took the time at these other tracks to do it. So helped him mark out in the loop of where, at the race that we were at, where would he start a sprint, and walked him through just how he would do it if he was at the loop against us, and reminded him he could win, reminded him he was a winner if he could do that. And just that little shift in mindset, Terry won for the first time. And then after he became a winner, he won again in the future. And so the reason I bring that story up is because you are a winner. You have the ability to win as often as you want. You may not win every day. I already told you I don't win every day, but I win most days. And when I don't win the day, I win it back the next day. I make sure I win the day before the next day. Even if I had to roll to 2 days, I win, and I make sure I win my weeks every week, right? I mean, I'm super committed to that. And so I think of yourself as Terry Wyman. If you've like struggled to win every day, think about the fact that, do I have the mindset of a winner? And so that's kind of where I was going with this whole idea of this NASCAR mentality is, I'm not wearing the shirt. It's too bad. I should have worn my other shirt, but one of our shirts has race flags on the back. Well, you see it's on the front of Win by Noon, right? Is that whole race flag theme. And understanding that you can win, right? Understanding that you can win, but you have to have a plan. Understanding that when your plan gets bumped, right? When you get bumped from behind and you have to take a pit stop, that you can still get back on track and win. And then ultimately that you have this opportunity that when you feel like you're not going to win, you can go all in and you can still close out your day and make sure that you win the day when you don't win by noon. That, my friends, is what I learned from NASCAR. And don't forget to be spontaneous. In fact, I got a text from my dad and he just said, hey guys, let's make sure, thanks again. Let's make sure that we don't wait so much time before the next boys trip. And that'll be my last little story I'll tell you, because we actually took one. We realized the last real boys trip we took was 7 years ago. And again, we've taken a lot of family trips since then. A lot of, like we just took my brothers, my sister-in-laws and all my nieces and nephews. We had 19 of us at a house in Temecula for Thanksgiving. So we do lots of family trips, but this was a boys trip. And the last boys trip was, my dad's a Porsche guy. So we drove 2 of his Porsches down 3 hours from Phoenix. We went to a private racetrack that's in this town called Wilcox, and had a Porsche certified driver come out, and instructor who's from the Porsche club. And he drove with us in the cars and said, here's how you're going to take these. First, we watched him, right? So I guess it'll be another good analogy. And, typical Todd story, I was letting you go and then I'll talk for 3 more minutes and I'll get us off after about 30. But you would go out in the car on the track. He would first tell us what the plan was, right? Here's what we're going to do. Here's how it's going to be. And then we each got to drive with him individually. And he would say, okay, here's the straightaway. Here's where you're going to hit the brake and the turn. And here's how you're going to corner on the turn, and kind of walked us through in his car with him driving how we did it. And then after doing a couple laps like that, then we switched seats and we got to drive, and he got to say, okay, great. Yep. Here it is. Right. Brake, gas, just things that are counterintuitive in a car. You actually tap the brakes to shift the momentum of the car. And then you actually hit the gas coming out of the corner to get your speed. And it was really fascinating. And so we went out there and we did that for a weekend, which was just a blast. But, again, it's the whole idea of, we just weren't proactive in planning between now and then. And so I would encourage you, especially any of you who have friends or family that you haven't done enough with one-on-one, especially with this whole health situation we've been in. It's a great opportunity to find something fun. And this was a blast for us. And I appreciate you guys all jumping on here and letting me retell the story through the eyes of a lesson for Win by Noon, and ultimately productivity. But I feel like it's a lesson in life. I feel like that we all want to be the best that we can be. You're here because you want to try to be better. Maybe you're here because you had nothing else to do. Maybe you're here because you were intrigued by the title. Maybe you're here for whatever reason you're here. But the bottom line is that I believe all of us have the ability to reach our potential, whatever we believe it to be. So therefore, whatever you view as you being a champion is what I want you to achieve. So as always, I'm going to give you an action plan, right? You just spent 29 minutes here listening to me tell a story that I was told in a way that will hopefully give you some encouragement to make a plan, hopefully give you some encouragement that when your plan gets off a track, to take a pit stop and get back on track. And then if you totally get your butt bumped and you turn around and you're going and spinning in circles, that you can still go all in and have the mindset of a champion and still win your day. And that's what I want for you. I know if you can do that, then you'll crush it. So I would just say this: wherever you are, it's midday, right? If you're in the West Coast, it's midday. If you're on the East Coast, it's the end of the day. So it's your time. It's your opportunity to close out this day with success. Shoot me an email. Let me know how you did. I appreciate you guys being here. And I look forward to seeing you on our next Monday Mastermind. Deborah Bird will be here next week. I have a real estate agent coming on next week. So if you're a loan officer, have your real estate agents here. If you're a real estate agent, be here. She is going to walk us through how she does CMA. So I've got a lot of people who want to get themselves going on the CMA Day Challenge, or loan officers who want to get their real estate agents going on that. And so I've got Veronica Morrow. She's going to come on, and I'm going to make sure that my desired end result is that she shows you how to do a CMA, how she's doing them, because I think if we can get people past the how, then they'll be all in on that as well. So peace. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you next week.